Dr. Lawson Davis is a career educator with over 30 years of experience as a practitioner, scholar, author, and consultant. A graduate of the College of William and Mary. Dr. Davis holds both master's and doctorate degrees in gifted education. Diversity education and gifted education are her areas of special expertise. Dr. Davis has published numerous articles, technical reports, and book chapters. Dr. Davis' award-winning book, Bright, Talented, and Black. A guide for families of African American gifted learners is the first of its kind on the market to address the advocacy needs of Black families raising gifted students. Davis is currently the Spatial Populations columnist for the National Association for Gifted Children publication, Teaching for High Potential, and serves on the Gifted Child Today Advisory Board. Dr. Davis served a 2-year term as a chair of the National Association for Gifted Children's Diversity and Equity Committee, and now she is serving her first term as an at-large member of the Board of Directors. Dr. Lawson Davis has honored our Congress as a special guest. I am inviting Ms. Lawson Davis to the stage to make her presentation, called Cross Factors in Children Who Have Different Spatial Talents, Culture, Gender, and Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Council, the Congress, for having me come from Virginia in the United States of America to Istanbul to be with you for this very special conference. I'm very excited. I've had a wonderful time with your colleagues here, and I would like to share with you very briefly some of the work that I have conducted, particularly surrounding the needs of culturally diverse students, female students, and the impact of their gender and culture on their talent development. Many intersecting variables affect the lives of all students. Among these variables are gender, culture, and income. These factors are important in designing appropriate instructional environments in which these students may flourish. In particular, educators of culturally diverse students who have been often overlooked and marginalized in advanced educational programming for gifted children must have a clear and more sensitive understanding of the impact of culture and gender on the intellectual and psychosocial development of children within varied cultural groups, and how their cultural norms impact the present conditions as well as their future trajectories. This session will share evidence-based practices and new insights into how consideration of culture and gender in particular may help all educators of the gifted frame improved services and specialized programs in the future. This is a holistic view of the gifted child. And similar to earlier presenters during the Congress, it is very important for us to understand that the gifted and talented child is a child who has a gender, an income, a culture that has shaped their development since they were born. Without consideration of all of these variables and all these factors, oftentimes we are not able to provide the types of services that are very important for our students. I want to especially thank the previous presenter who mentioned the importance of cultural norms and culture and bringing culture to the surface as we work with students. They are not just children in a vacuum. They are children who come from a group, a society that has its own norms that are very relevant to who that child is as an individual. And it's very important for that to be considered as we shape educational programs. The norms, traditions, and the intergenerational legacy of these groups and their culture, the cultural hierarchy even, where did they come from? What do they know about their own culture? And how well are we able to integrate that into school programs is very, very important. When we pretend that students' culture is not important to them, or we use a colorblind approach to working with children, what we have done is made a portion of them that's very important invisible. And it's really not appropriate for that to happen. And we're working very hard in the United States to bring culture to the surface as we design educational programs, as we look at identification protocols. How biased are the tools that we use? Are these tools the best tools to use for all children? It's very important for us to make consideration of all these variables as we move forward and specialized programs for gifted children. The marginalized communities that we are particularly interested in are those children who live in rural communities, who live in mountainous regions around the world where they are not able to easily access the best educational programs, those students that live in high-poverty urban areas whose families may not have the income to access the best services, the private schools, the summer programs, the after-school programs that are necessary for their development. And impoverished communities in any region are considered among these marginalized communities. Giftedness or genius can show itself anywhere. I want to say that again. Giftedness or genius can show itself anywhere. It doesn't matter how much money a child's family has. It does not matter who their family members are. What matters is that that child himself has a different way of seeing the world, a different way of reacting to the world, and has potential to be developed that we are responsible for as educators. The gender imperatives that are really important for us to consider as we look at the needs of females in school districts and school programs around the world. It's important for us to ensure that females have early access and sustained access to science, technology, engineering, math, coursework, and programming. While I was traveling into Istanbul earlier this week, I started reading a book that's titled Hidden Figures. This is a book that was written by a young lady in Virginia after she found out about a group of women who worked for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, our space program in the United States, a group of women who were called computers. These women worked behind the scenes of our space program in the United States and were responsible for the calculations of the space program, the trajectory of the launch. They were actually responsible for John Glenn landing on the moon. But until recently, we did not know that there were women who were working in NASA all day long, every day, doing this work. A group of those women have been recognized as being some of the most highly capable mathematicians in the world. One woman in particular named Katherine Johnson, who's been named a prodigy. Katherine Johnson today is, I believe, over 100 years old, and she recently won an award, the American Medal of Freedom, I believe. And Katherine was a girl prodigy, a child prodigy, whose mathematical skills were so astute that her family realized when she was a very young girl that she needed special programming in order for her to fully develop. But even as an educator, someone who's been in the field for a long time and read many, many history books and many, many books about gifted children, I never knew the name Katherine Johnson until just about a year ago. Katherine and the names of all of her colleagues who were these computers, they called them. Their title was computers, who worked for NASA behind the scenes. There were over 100 women. This is a very encouraging story to us as we recognize that these young women were those persons responsible for. If it were not for those women, John Glenn would not have landed on the moon. So it's very important for us not to set aside the skills and the capabilities and the genius in individuals just because of their gender. We have to address the inequities by ensuring that girls are admitted to the same schools at the same rate as boys are all around the world. We have to provide access to programming by way of scholarships and funding. We recognize that in some of our more advanced private schools and some of our more advanced schools for gifted children, even in the United States, there's often a fee that parents have to pay. Well, if these parents are poor and they're not able to make those arrangements, then we need to, as a society, come up with ways of providing funding for these girls to have the same level of education that the males in their population have. Providing humanities-based programs for these ladies, these young ladies, are just as important as STEM programs. I use in my work Francois Gagne's talent development model. And his model suggests that there are some catalysts, some individuals, some situations that children must be exposed to in order for their talent to be fully developed. Among those are families, of course, access to programming, resources, and then, of course, the teachers and the scholars that these young people come in contact with. One of the questions that came up in an earlier study that was presented, and actually the other day when we had a conversation at the school, one of the teachers asked, did teachers of the gifted have to be gifted themselves? And we still grapple with that, and some people are on one side of the answer, some are on the other side of the answer, and my response to that is that these people have to be brave, and they have to be courageous. And my colleagues said they need to know their content. It's very important. So whether you're gifted or not, if you are courageous enough to face these young people who may know more answers to questions than you do, and they're half your size, who may have read more books than you have read, who may have a vocabulary that's more lengthy and more extensive than yours, who are able to calculate number problems in their head that at a faster rate than you can, then you can be a teacher of the gifted. In our training for teachers of the gifted, we expose them to what we know about the characteristics of gifted children, but we also expose them to the curriculum, and we invite anyone to come into these programs who are interested in this exceptional population of children. So we're still on the fence about that answer. Do you have to be gifted? Maybe not, but you certainly have to be brave. These are some shared traits that we've come out of the literature of gifted children. These traits are of gifted children regardless of their ethnic group, their geographic region, or their gender. Usually these children are very ingenious and very creative. They have a high level of abstract reasoning. Most of the time, they are persistent and passionate about what they believe in. Persistent and passionate. It's hard to measure persistence and passion. And so what we have to do is ensure that we are at least observing these students and paying attention to how they respond to instruction and how they respond to situations around the world. Usually they have advanced cognitive ability within one or more domains. They may be verbally inclined, they may be mathematically inclined, they may be scientifically inclined, or in some cases they may be a polyglot. Is that the correct term? They may be someone who is, I call them Renaissance children, who are able to do very, very well in most areas, in many areas. They also sometimes may be introverts and they may be extroverts. The jury is still out. Because a child is an introvert and is quiet and shy and doesn't always speak out and speak up in class, does it make that child any less gifted or have any less potential for genius? Absolutely not. There again, that's where our role as teachers and educators come in. We have to really get close enough and understand these children well enough and then go back to history and examine some of the lives of individuals who were considered among their group at a time genius or gifted or making significant contributions. I think we'll find people on both sides. There's one story I want to share with you, and I'm going to depend on this young man back here or somebody down there to give me 5 when I have 5 minutes left, okay? Because I don't want anybody walking on the stage and telling me I'm talking too long. I'm linguistically gifted. I like to talk, so I could be here all day. So 45 minutes is not a long time to have a conversation for me. But anyway, there is a story about a boy who lived in a remote village in Africa. I believe he is from Ghana. His name is William, and some of you may be familiar with this story. But if you are working in schools with children at the present time, or even if you're a scholar doing research on gifted traits, I would absolutely refer you to the story of William, the boy who harnessed the wind. William was in a village where his father was a farmer. And as a farmer, his father definitely depended on the weather to make sure that his crops were irrigated well enough so that he could continue to yield good crops at the end of the harvest season. Being in a remote area, they also oftentimes did not have access to electricity, and so William was concerned about that. William also attended school, but they had to pay for school in his village. And as soon as the village suffered through a drought, William could no longer attend school because his father and mother did not have the funds. So if it was for William to come out of school at that time and try to come up with other ways of making money, he's the oldest child in the family, of making money to help the family. But what William did was spend time in the library. He went to the school library, and though he could not speak English very well, William was what we call a visual spatial learner. He checked out physics books, and in those physics books, he saw pictures of windmills. Okay, so this young man is looking at physics books, and he's looking at pictures of windmills. And as he looks at these pictures of windmills, he decides that if he can build a windmill, he'll be able to create an irrigation system for his family's farm. He might also be able to create a way of bringing electricity into his village. And that's exactly what he did. I don't want to give you all the details because I want you to go to the TED Talks, TED Talks. You know what TED Talks are. And I want you to look up William's story. And I also want you to check out the book, purchase the book for your children, and have them read, or you read this book to them. This is the story of a boy who was ingenious, creative, passionate, persistent, had abstract reasoning ability, visual spatial skills, very high cognitive ability, because William actually built a windmill. And when he built the windmill was able to do exactly what he wanted it to do. The windmill created an irrigation system, as I've said, and he also was able to bring electricity into his hut in the village, so much so that people were lining up to come in and charge their phones. William became a hero for his community, and as a result, one of our universities in America came to visit with him and flew him over to America so that he could attend school and work in laboratories with scientists. I won't tell you the end of the story, but you need to understand these children are everywhere. It mattered not that William lived in a remote village. It mattered not that he was very poor. What mattered was that William had these traits. And these traits were able to promote and prompt him into doing something that he thought was very important. And besides, he probably was very bored when he wasn't going to school. There are 3 keys to successful programming that I'd like to discuss with you for diverse gifted students and probably for any gifted child. What we call cohort groups are very important. A cohort group is when children are in a group with individuals who are like themselves. One of the problems that we have with programming is oftentimes students feel very isolated if they come into a school or a particular program and they're the only one. Just imagine a laboratory program, a science lab program for children in the 5th or 6th grade, and you go into the science lab and all of the students in the program are boys, and someone recommends that this girl goes into this program with the boys, and she feels very, very isolated. Or imagine a child who is of low income and goes into a program or a school where most of the students' families have money, and they talk about some of the vacations they take and the things that they're able to do, and this child doesn't have the benefit of those experiences. Stories abound about racially and gender diverse students who have been ostracized because they were the only one or told that you don't belong here. Students need to feel a strong sense of belonging and acceptance. Cohort groups combat the effects of isolation and increase the assurance of a more comfortable fit for diverse students to focus more on the academic challenges and less on their need for acceptance. Secondly, mentoring and career development programs are very important. By middle years, across a range of disciplines, we encourage career development. So as they're in elementary school, having all these wonderful experiences like I observed in the school the other day, well, what will those experiences lead to? What's the outcome for those experiences? It's important for us to have them begin thinking about what might they be willing to do or want to do in the sciences or the arts, other professional careers, in architecture, in medicine, in other areas. What about cross-disciplinary careers? But we need to start exposing students to these types of experiences by the middle years so that they can begin making some decisions. And also exposing them to adults who are mentors who can share their life experience and other positive personality traits, including the importance of a positive racial and gender identity. The power of mentoring programs cannot be overstated. And finally, in situations where culturally diverse students are a part of a specialized programs at a university or summer programs and many different children are coming together, it's important for educators to understand the culture. I love to travel so that I can learn about the world's cultures, but I don't know all there is to know. I felt very uncomfortable when I first boarded the Turkish Airlines flight from Norfolk, Virginia, to come here the other day, because as they spoke in their language, I didn't understand that language. It was a very uncomfortable feeling for me, even as an adult. And so you can imagine when children go into situations where they may be with teachers who don't know their language, don't know their group, don't know their religion, and they may kind of put things to the side and say that that's not very important. But it is important. Who that child is a makeup of all those parts of himself, his religion, his gender, his culture. It's very important. And so teachers, educators need to be sensitized to all those features in that child. And it's important for us to have those cultural competency trainings to avoid what we call a cultural mismatch. There's a mismatch when, as an educator, I'm not familiar with the culture and the norms and the legacy of my students. I need to study that. I moved into southwestern Louisiana several years ago to teach. And my students were a group of students whose family members were called Cajuns or Acadians. They were part of the Acadian culture. So prior to going to the University of Louisiana, I read lots of books that summer, that spring and summer, so that I could at least become familiar. And I went to the museums, the local museums that told the story, the very tragic story of the Acadians as they traveled from Canada down into the United States and ended up in Louisiana. And I learned so much about them just having those experiences, reading and going to the museum, so that when I met my first set of students, I asked them questions about themselves. I wouldn't dare to assume that I knew much about them because I'd never lived in that part of the United States. The United States is very, very diverse. And I had to know my students better in order for me to work with them and to teach them better. And so my training came as a part of what I did for myself and my students. It helped me. But in our schools in the United States, we recommend what we call cultural competency training. This is a model that I've developed and recommend as we look at providing a comprehensive set of services for these students. First of all, and I don't want to make this because I haven't spoken about families. It's very important that we engage the families of gifted children in their education, because the families know them better than any of us. They started out with their families. And again, the families are the places, the persons who know what the norms and the legacies and the important cultural benefits of that particular child. Engaging families and community leaders in this programming and service process is very important. Identifying and serving cohort groups of students, and then offering a range of options across the STEM areas, arts, leadership, ensuring that all teachers and staff are culturally competent, providing mentors and role models for both the boys and girls, males and females, from the time that they are in primary school through secondary school. And of course, also providing for grade level and content acceleration. In the United States, in our school programs, as gifted educators, educators of the gifted, we encourage content and grade level acceleration. That will provide a child who may be well beyond their grade level that they've been matched with an opportunity to skip and to move ahead so that they'll be in a more appropriate setting. We do encourage that in our private schools or in some of our more progressive programs. It's easier said than it happens. But in public schools, sometimes public school administrators resist acceleration. Many times because of that, parents may not be so pleased and happy with the program. But we have good research that says that acceleration works. I've had conversations and I have received stories that are published from family members who have had their children who were 14 and 15 and even 13 years old completing their grades all the way through secondary school and entering college at 14 because they were accelerated, and in some cases because families have taken the responsibility of homeschooling their children. So acceleration is a good model. It's an effective model. Many gifted learners will not have a need to continue along the grade level path that we have them in regular programs. I just want to remind everyone that it's our responsibility as a global community to come together at these types of congresses. I think this is a very, very important event. And I appreciate the opportunity to have been invited to come with you to share my ideas, but also to learn from you. I've taken lots of notes. I've gone to your websites. I have talked with people, and I think I've formed some partnerships here, because that's what it's going to take for us to do better for these children around the world. These children have the answers to what plagues our society, and it's up to us to provide services so that they can, in a very moral and conscionable way, they can learn and they can develop together. They can access each other so much more easily now than many years ago. And so we are a global community, which makes us a very small community. And it's important for us to look at and take the responsibility on of dedicating time and attention to these students who have these special traits. Be sure that we do this in a heartful and a mindful way so that we can all better benefit from the needs that these children have, and also develop the children so that they can be happier and more comfortable adults as they grow up. It's not just for us as a society, but it's also for the individual. I appreciate the time and attention that you've given to my work, and I will continue to form partnerships and bonds with you to see how well we can work across the line to do as much as we can do for each other. Thank you very much.
Teşekkür ederim. Herkese merhaba. Bu üstün zekalı çocukların veya normal çocukların evde eğitimiyle alakalı homeschooling'den bahsettiniz. Bunun ülkenizdeki uyarlaması veya yoğunluğu, özelliği nasıl acaba? Bunu yapanlar sadece ebeveynler mi, yoksa daha donanımlı veya eğitimli ebeveynlerin mi bunu yapması daha uygun, makul karşılanıyor? Teşekkür ederim.
Homeschooling is a strategy that parents utilize when they Homeschooling is a strategy used by parents when they want to teach their children at home. And in the United States, a number of homeschooling networks have developed. These networks allow parents to share materials online. It also allows parents to find homeschooling communities. In many cases, it may be that a parent is not only teaching his or her children, they may have a whole neighborhood of children that they're teaching. It will be a larger group. Most of the time, the homeschool parents are professionals in specialized areas, and they've decided for a period of time to not work, but to stay at home with the children. It may be the father, it may be the mother. The father may be an engineer. As a matter of fact, I knew a mom who was an engineer who homeschooled her 2 children for 3 years and then brought them into the public school. And so oftentimes these are professional parents who have degrees, most terminal degrees, who've decided that they want to teach their children in a home environment. Parents of children from diverse populations sometimes do that because they don't feel as if the schools are giving their children the full benefit of their cultural history. And they oftentimes think they can do this better on their own.
Konuşmanızı çok beğeniyle dinledim. Ülkenizde özel yetenekli ve üstün zekalı çocuklara eğitim için sadece bu eğitimi veren okul olarak isim vermek isteseniz hangileridir bunlar? Ben daha çok bu okulların mimari yönüyle ilgileniyorum, mimarım. Ve Türkiye'de de bu tür okulların mimarisinin nasıl olabileceği konusunda kendime sorular soruyorum. Burada da buna ait bir bildirim olacak. Araştırmalarımızı zenginleştirmek için soruyorum. İsim de verebilirseniz mutlu olurum. Bunların çerçevesini anlatabilirseniz. Teşekkür ederim.
There are 2 schools that I think of. One is actually in Virginia. Virginia Commonwealth University has a very strong fine arts program and an engineering program and now an architecture program. And Virginia Commonwealth University is in Richmond, Virginia. That's actually the city that I work in. And I could probably also, that's a college, that's a university. And perhaps you may want to look at the Illinois Math and Science Academy to see what might be available there. And there are no others that are specific to architecture that I can think of at this time, but there may be others that are university. But if we're talking about primary, middle, or secondary schools, I don't have any in mind. But I would, again, I'm from Virginia, and I'd like to encourage those of you who are interested in secondary programming for gifted students to take a look at Virginia's Governor Schools program. Our state has the advantage of having schools all across the state for high school gifted students. And they come in from different areas, and the schools have specialized programming. One may be an arts and technology program. One may be an international studies program. We even have an agriculture program for gifted students in Virginia now, and they're all over the state of Virginia, very well funded. The students don't pay anything to attend. They have to be admitted, of course, but they do not pay to attend, and these are excellent schools, have some of the best ratings of any high schools in the country. I would certainly recommend you, if you're looking at secondary schools, to look at Virginia's Governor Schools, and North Carolina, the state right below us, south of Virginia, also has some very fine Governor Schools programs.
Herkese iyi günler. Sertan Ballı, Adnan Menderes İlkokulu, Kayseri'den. Öncelikle hocama hoş geldiniz diyorum. Hocam, şimdi bizim üstün yetenekli öğrencilerle sistem çalışmaları yapmak istiyoruz da sistemle ilgili öğrencilerdeki gelişim konusunda bize örnekler verebilir misiniz? Veya sistemin bu çocuklar üzerine olumlu etkiler yaptığı ile ilgili sizin çalışmalarınız var mı? Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
I'm not familiar with any particular research around the impact of STEM necessarily, but we do have information that talks to us about the impact of science activities, alone, or hands-on activities on the learning of students. And often we also utilize those kinds of activities to help us recognize the strengths that students have. So we use them for performance-based activities in the classroom for primary school students. But at this point, you have my email address, and if you would email, I could perhaps send some other information to you when I get back home. I am connected with a number of researchers and scholars across the United States, and I can certainly pose that question to individuals I know who are doing research with early childhood programming.
Teşekkür ediyorum sunumunuz için. Şimdi eğitimde alternatif uygulamalar içerisinde evde eğitim, evde okul kavramları var. Şimdi sunumunuzda geçtiği için sormak istedim. Bu bahsettiğiniz uygulama, homeschooling dediğiniz kavram, evde eğitim mi, evde okul kavramıyla ilişkin mi? Aileler bu eğitimi verdiklerinde yeterli bir eğitim sağlayabiliyorlar mı? Buna devlet ve yasalar hangi okul düzeyine kadar müsaade edebiliyor? Teşekkür ediyorum.
For students who are homeschooled by their parents, it's called homeschooling in the United States. Parents must, however, report to their local school district the curriculum that they are utilizing, and the school district would in turn approve that curriculum. So there are several curricula that are actually approved by local school districts that parents, there will be a list. And if they use one of those curricula, they would check off, but they do have to report to the local school board what they're doing. And that's how they're able to actually do this in the home, and the child is able to move from one grade level to the next grade level. But it's totally outside of the school. And when I say homeschooling, I'm referring to curriculum, not necessarily practices that parents use to raise children, but we're talking about curriculum like they would be exposed to in school.